All right. So I know it's been a long and very busy day, but we hope to, punctuate the main stage with a bang with our final panel. I'm very excited to introduce our panel moderator, Eric Mirandet, on the future of manufacturing is now.
All right. So my name's Eric Mirandet. First of all, thanks everyone for taking the time to be with us all day. I know it's been a long day, a little bit of a wet day. Sorry about that. But thank you for coming to this final event. We're really excited about the panel today. We're going to discuss some interesting topics. My name's Eric Mirandet. I lead product and ecosystem for Tulip. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to the panel to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into some questions here. So, John, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. My name is John Dyck. I'm the CEO of CESMII, the Smart Manufacturing Institute, kind of a strange organization, at least in this country. We're funded by the federal government to accelerate the adoption and the democratization of smart manufacturing, and we'll obviously get into that in more detail. I've spent my career in 3 other companies prior to coming here. Rockwell Automation twice. I left after 10 years to go raise some venture capital, create a startup called Active Plant, kind of one of the early days of manufacturing intelligence, mostly in the automotive OEM and Tier 1 space. That was acquired. I went to GE. I led their Prophecy platform globally, and then came back to Rockwell. So kind of in this sort of technology provider ecosystem, automation, kind of OT world, growing up into the IT space, and that's shaped a lot of my I guess worldview, looking at how these two worlds collide and how we can really fundamentally improve the way manufacturers make things and become more competitive here in the U.S.
Also, thank you for having me, Eric, everybody for joining. So my name's Walker Reynolds. I'm the chairman of 3 companies, actually. So Intellic Integration is a full-service systems integrator based in Dallas, Texas. 4.0 Solutions, which is how most people know me. We run IIoT.University, so we teach executive leaders how to lead digital transformation initiatives through our mastermind program, and then we teach engineers and citizen developers how to partake and support digital transformation initiatives through mentorship. I've been in manufacturing about 25 years. I actually started out working in a salt mine, translated into consulting about midway through my career, and my life's mission growing up in upstate New York has been to help save and create middle-class jobs through saving manufacturing in the US. So everything I talk about on our YouTube channel and in our educational content is in service of that singular mission.
Hello, everybody. My name is Gilad Linger. I'm with Tulip as well, a colleague of Eric. I'm responsible for the customer services at Tulip and our industry practice, which is our collective know-how and experience around digital technology, which is dear and near to my heart. Really, I started talking about these concepts that we today call smart manufacturing IoT back in the 90s, where I did some research in Europe, which was the fundamental, the basis for what was then to become Industry 4.0. So when I met Tulip back in 2019, it was a bit of a epiphany for me, because all of a sudden, the realization of many of the things that I believed were the right things for manufacturing back in the 90s. And since the 90s, I left and I did a lot of work with the industry, traditional systems, kind of hit my head against the wall for some 20 years. And now I get to, in the Tulip world, to preach to our customers, you guys, all about this digital technology and how it's going to improve manufacturing. And I keep talking about order of magnitude productivity gains, and I'll say that again, probably a few times as well. But that is, it's basically the revolution that we're going to today. So again, this is my passion. It's probably going to come out a few times today.
All right. Well, I want to thank our panelists for being with us today. For those of you who know or know of our panelists today, you'll probably know that there's no shortage of opinions represented on this panel. So I want to go ahead and jump right into it.
No.
I'm going to start, Walker, let's start with you. What's the one thing that is like the biggest thing that pisses you off about Industry 4.0, or what people say is Industry 4.0?
So the list is long and distinguished, but
Yeah, it is.
I would say if I had to distill it into one, It's the incestuous relationships that the industry contains. The fact that it should be about solving problems for manufacturers. It should be about enabling frontline workers who are the smartest people in the organization. They know what the problems are. They may not articulate the same way that the C-suite does, but they know what the problems are. It should be about solving those problems through enablement, but oftentimes it is too much about serving commercial relationships that are in direct competition or competing directly against optimal for organizations. And most of the time I am provocative because I am trying to challenge that status quo. So that is, there's many things that bother me, but if I had to distill it, it would be that, yeah.
Gilad, what about you?
So I'm going to frame it as a story. Again, like Walker, many things. This, and again, if you know me, you probably have heard my rants. So, this is a fictitious, stereotypical plant manager. You walk in the plant manager's office, and he's very proudly telling you about the Tesla that is parked out there and how he can start remotely and how his iPhone and all this new technology and, all the gadgets that he have. And you turn around and look at the plant and you see paper and antiquated technology and, all this. And there's just a disconnect between the two. It boils down to this risk averseness that, we have to meet our targets and productivity goals and all that stuff. And there's just a lack of understanding of what this technology can do to your plant. And nobody's willing to take that first step. And, that's, it just boils my blood.
I'm not a technocrat. I just want to follow up on that. I'm not a technocrat. I don't think engineers and scientists should rule the world. But I think we're in the age of Kaikaku right now. So between continuous improvement cycles, right? Groundbreaking innovation. And right now, organizations should be led by technocrats. They should be led, if you look at the most innovative organizations, they're led by executives who understand natively the value of data as a commodity, that we can find patterns in data you can't see with the naked eye, and therefore data is always valuable. We're not making the business case for data, we just take it for granted. But
John, what about you?
Yeah, so you stole my line. I call that the putting lipstick on the Industry 3.0 pig and on the Industry 4.0. Seriously, I mean, I've been part of that ecosystem my entire career, and we've had these conversations. With our portfolio, with our software portfolio, what does Industry 4.0 mean? What does the industrial Internet of Things mean? And how can we kind of rebrand our stuff and just kind of make it fit? And yet, 10, 12 years after we began talking about the fourth industrial revolution, which is a huge misnomer. Manufacturers don't do revolutions, right? How many manufacturers think about being on the bleeding edge all day long? They don't, right? This needs to be an evolution, but that's a minor detail. We began talking about this, and there was supposed to be $10 trillion of value creation in manufacturing operations over the next 10 years. And guess what happened exactly coincident with that? If you look at manufacturing U.S. productivity here in the U.S., since they began collecting data in '85, this is data available at the Federal Reserve. Anybody can download it. I refresh my chart every quarter. Since they began collecting data till 2010, steady linear growth in U.S. manufacturing productivity. In 2010, coincident with this launch of Industry 4.0, manufacturing productivity plateaued, and then 5 years ago it began declining. And here we are talking about reshoring and friendshoring and regionalizing supply chains. And what do we have? We have pilot purgatory, we have declining productivity, and putting lipstick on the pig, and that's not sufficient. One more anecdote. I've worked for a few automation companies, but they're all like this, so don't pin this on any one of them. Ask one of them to take one sensor. We did this exercise. One sensor, plug it into a PLC, bring it into your HMI SCADA system, bring it into a portal, a historian, and then show a trend on a portal. What does that take in today's ecosystem? Well, in a homogeneous environment, which most of you don't represent, but a pure play environment, it takes 6 different software products that you have to install mostly on premise.
That's right.
You have to configure the same tag 4 different ways in 4 of those products. And it takes about 980 some keyboard strokes or mouse clicks to get that done for one frickin' sensor, right? That's the technical debt we've created in this space that we have to deal with. And we're just sort of okay with that, right? The vendors get away with this, and we let them. And so I think This is what's unique about U.S. manufacturing. Actually, I'll stop there.
But a couple of years ago, John and I had a conversation. CESMII reached out. We had this conversation. I saw John was a former Rockwell guy. I'm like, I rolled my eyes. Okay, great. And I didn't know John that well. I mean, but I have since grown to know John much better. But we had this very conversation in that first call, that the problem was point-to-point linear integration. Why is it manufacturers are not investing in innovation? And the reality was because the spend, the ask outweighed the perceived value. And then today we come to this conference and I walk the floor and I go down here to the very edge to where the machine kit is. And I ask this engineer whose name I don't remember, but I want to remember, show me this machine kit, this dumb drill press, this dumb soldering iron. And how long did it take you to integrate that drill press and that soldering iron into this ecosystem with those two sensors? And he said, 10 minutes, start to finish. Right?
And the skill set that
Right.
you need for that.
That's right.
I mean, he is an engineer, but he does probably not automation, right? And basically anybody can do it. And that's key to what's going on. It's the speed and the skill that you need to use new technology.
Yep. That's democratization, reducing
Exactly.
cost and complexity.
Right.
That 5 years ago, they talked about the 5 year ago number, right? So there was a bifurcation that happened. We had this plateau in 2010, and then a bifurcation 5 years ago. We have a group of manufacturers who are all started after the fourth industrial revolution who have just taken off. You know the names, Tesla, Amazon, enter in many other companies. And then the rest of the group, the legacy manufacturers, only about 1 out of 12 can successfully digitally transform. And it's technical debt that's holding them back and a lack of transformative leadership. That is fundamentally the problem.
And what should consume?
Yeah.
So let me ask. So we understand. So technology is important. We have a new set of tools that we didn't have, 20 years ago. Technology is evolving. We also embrace technology in our everyday life. I mean, this is how we order our cabs. This is how we do our banking. We want to get a pizza. What do we use? We use apps. We use our cell phones. And yet, manufacturing hasn't kept up, despite the promise of the fourth industrial revolution and trillions of dollars of savings, which is completely at odds with the reality that we see. One theme that I'm hearing is like, one, we need to embrace technology. Two, we need to empower the frontline workers. How do you do that?
I would flip that around, by the way. I would start with embrace the frontline worker and then embrace technology. Enable first. If you look at the difference between the most transformative organizations and the least transformative organizations, you can distill it down into one thing and one thing only, and that is how enabled are the frontline workers to solve their problems in service of solving the business's problems. That's where it starts.
You bet. Well said. We have arguably one of the most expensive workforces on the planet, and yet we don't equip them. We don't give them the tools. And it really is a function of the complexity of the many siloed, stovepiped systems that are arguably there for them to make their jobs easier, right? If you look at the most sophisticated, highly automated manufacturers on the planet, they've got a massive, massive install base of highly complex systems that are there to help make decisions for the area manager, for the line manager, but the people themselves are not involved. We have not created the environment, the culture, or the technologies that can get to that point. Present company accepted, but that's kind of what we're here to talk about.
In fact, it's even worse, as we get digitally native people coming into the workforce, and if they've been in the company for half a year, they go back to paper. They are now arguing the case that this is the right way to do things. In some cases, which is astounding. Yeah. That you get digitally native that they go home and use apps, but then they will tell you that paper is the right way to use because they're in the plant. They've been indoctrinated. That's how fast that culture is moving, and it's just the wrong thing.
Well, I think I go to conferences all the time. I'm asked to speak all the time. This is literally the very first conference I've ever attended in my entire career where the focus was on application and collaboration and the frontline worker. Literally the first conference. Yuri's keynote address this morning, literally, it was the first time I have ever seen a keynote that showed the mechanics of digital transformation. 4 steps, 2 of which were learning what not to do. Okay? Literally the first keynote address. I told Yuri after his speech, you need to give that over and over and over again all across the world because think about it, 2023, and this is the first conference. I mentioned incestuous relationships. There are competitors in here who are collaborating. You go to the HiBite desk over there, you got HiBite, and you have 3 other vendors who their demo is all seamlessly integrated together, and I guarantee they put it together in the last 24 hours. You go out to the t-shirt booth, which I think is the coolest thing. He developed that application at 11 o'clock last night. 11 o'clock, he came in, all they had were t-shirts, and he built an application that is counting which t-shirts were manufactured, at which count, and when, starting at 11 o'clock last night. This conference itself is evidence of the shift in our thinking, right? And I hope, part of the reason I freed my schedule to be here is because I believe that Tulip can be one of the organizations that help leads that. So, I mean, we're seeing it with our own eyes. But the fact that this is the first time is evidence of the rule, right?
So there's this tension. There's the paper. There's this aversion to digital technology. There's one word that I haven't heard mentioned when we're talking about productivity gains and efficiency and improving process. And that one word is lean. And I'm curious, why has that word been absent from the conversation? And are there any misperceptions around lean and the role of technology in enabling lean? I'm just curious to hear your perspectives on it.
So it's because we're in Kaikaku right now. So for those of you who know Kaizen, right, you have continuous improvement S-curve. When you first start investing dollars in continuous improvement, in lean improvement, you see very little return. Then you see exponential return, and then it plateaus. And then it plateaus, and it continues to plateau until you have groundbreaking innovation. What was the groundbreaking innovation? It was the internet, it was secure networks, it was MQTT, it was event-driven architectures. That's the groundbreaking innovation that we're seeing today. So that's Kaikaku. That's the phase in between continuous improvement cycles. The reason we don't talk about lean right now is because the first thing you have to do is shift to the new phase. That's the reason you don't hear it in my language. But right now what we have are organizations that are in the future, and we have organizations that are in the past, and we have organizations that are in the middle. Yeah. And the only people lean apply to are the ones who are in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, most organizations that we have the privilege of working with, which span every industry and from small, medium to large to hyperscale, they're not structured to bring data or digital to their lean organization. There has been this purist school of thought in the lean world that data is something that I can personally see. I can go and see. I don't need a system to tell me about my operation. And so I've been working with Toyota in various capacities my entire career. Remember when they had their epiphany that actually manufacturing intelligence was a thing for them. It took us 3 years to help them understand that data could help them be lean. And it frankly, to this day, I won't say that, but the organizational structures that bring lean and digital together for most organizations maybe happens at the top or one layer below the top. They need to be part of the same organization, and culturally, that's not where we are today.
Well, the good news is we have seen examples of that phase change within our customer base, and it's astounding when you see it. It really is something that I think we need to show. And it boils down to, lean has always advocated the N-1 technologies. Like, don't use the latest. Use always the one version before it's true and tested, all the kinks have been worked out. You cannot do that. In the speed of innovation right now, that doesn't work. N-1, you're missing out on many things, and it happens way too often. So sometimes and it's just prevalent within the industry, that disconnect between data, and you see it. And I was talking in my session just before about this. The computer glitch that shut down that Toyota factory. It's kind of ridiculous, but it's just because they don't see that as something that needs to be root caused and Kaizen. It's just another system. If they did, they probably never had such an issue because it's just a minor glitch, right?
Well, I want to follow up on this, and then sorry, John, but digital transformation is not continuous improvement. It is groundbreaking innovation. They are two completely separate things. One is incremental change based on a path we trust. One is finding a new path we trust. Okay, so you have to find the new path we trust before we can improve incrementally. That's what lean is, right? And I ask this question all the time. All these smart people in the room, and some people will be able to answer this, but if you haven't heard me give this answer yet, don't answer. But I'm going to ask you this question. If I were to take everybody in this room sit in a boardroom and say, the goal of our company is to sell any product that anyone wants to buy in the United States at the absolute best price, remotely, and get it shipped to their door in 48 hours or less, how would we do that? If I said, I'm the executive, I said, that's what we're going to do, and I turned it over to you guys and I said, how would we achieve that goal? How would we do it? And the answer is, very few of us in here know how to achieve that. Yet Amazon achieved that 13 years ago. How? Because in 2002, Jeff Bezos wrote a famous email saying, we share too much data manually. And if you do that starting tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., I'm going to fire you. And then he turned over 11% of the workforce in 18 months. And they built nothing but services. All data became a commodity in the organization. And now how does Amazon deliver anything we want to our door for the best price in 48 hours or less, or in 2 hours or less in Dallas where I live? Because they predict what I'm going to buy 6 weeks before I buy it. That's how they do it. You can do the exact same thing in your manufacturing environment. Tesla does it. Tesla doesn't do their manufacturing plan for tomorrow. They do it for 6 weeks in the future. But how many of your clients, how many of you do the same thing? That's the question. Right?
One of the things that we are beginning to build equity in is this notion of a smart manufacturing mindset. The idea that in the same way that continuous improvement and lean and safety and quality became part of our DNA in the past decades, which meant it became a natural extension of how we think and how we fund things, we can't continue what we've done for the last 3 decades, which is one use case at a time, justify it, analyze it, implement it, sustain it, one stovepipe architecture at a time. That is not sustainable, right? We have to create a mindset. We have to build the organizational acceptance and capability around this notion that smart manufacturing is the way we get better at lean, is the way we get better at quality, is the way we get better at safety, et cetera. And it's that next step, I agree 100%, Walker, it's that next quantum step forward in terms of how every one of those initiatives is going to create value for your operation.
So if digital transformation is this groundbreaking new, it's not step function, it's not incremental, but it is fundamentally a new paradigm. It is a new set of tools that have been embraced that make data available to everyone. And then only after that can we start to resume this continuous improvement and make sure that we're refining those tools. I'm curious, I hear the call to action, and yet if you talk to a lot of folks out there, a lot of people have been burned by so-called digital transformation. Why is it that so many of these projects fail?
I'll take it. I know Gilad is definitely going to have an answer to this. So I'll make mine very quick. It's because what we're trying to do is, what organizations have been trying to do is innovate, is trying to use old tools for new problems. That's fundamentally, that's the issue. They're taking it, and I use the language, they use an Industry 3.0 approach to an Industry 4.0 problem, right? I'll use this illustration. Let's talk about Tulip for a second. But, and I mentioned this a couple of times. You know that when Walt Disney built Disney World, he didn't allow his team to put sidewalks in, okay? What they did was they planted grass. And then they waited 2 years. And then they saw where it is, everyone walked. And then they put sidewalks down. Why did he do that? Because the answer is the only people who were equipped to tell him where the consumers were going to walk were the consumers themselves. Okay? Tulip is the grass for manufacturers. Tulip and platforms like it are the grass for manufacturers. The problem is, and John brings this up, that they start with an RFP. They start with one specific use case. They treat it as a standalone entity. It takes 18 to 24 months before they realize they didn't get what they paid for, and then they do it all over again. The new paradigm is the way that Yuri did it, right? Which is a combination of waterfall and agile, and learn as an organization as we go, adjust, create an ecosystem, enable citizens, developers, harden the things that work, and throw away the things that don't.
We stand at a really important juncture right now in history where I think we recognize that, I think for the first time in our respective careers, this is a really exciting place to be, right? This world of transformation. This is 20 years ago, I sat at an event with the VP of Operations for Ford North America. He said, manufacturing is not strategic for us. All we care about is who puts that brand, that Ford logo on the back of our vehicles. Today, Ford Motor Company sees manufacturing as strategic. And it's for all of the reasons we've talked about. But we're at the point where in our sort of S-curve here, most executives on this topic are approaching that sort of trough of disillusionment. They've seen pilot purgatory. They have not seen the value creation. They've seen the pilot purgatory over and over again. So let's work together to figure out how we can move beyond this quickly and create the environments, create the ecosystems, create the opportunities to open source, to crowdsource, to drive interoperability in ways that everybody can benefit from.
I'd love to hear Gilad.
So I mean, I can only echo some of the things, and we have to think about it. This is change and transformation is across the board. This is not unique. We as a humanity has gone through plenty of transformation, et cetera. I think manufacturing is a bit handicapped because we're engineers, and that's our problem, right? We don't like to take a step forward before we know everything, and so we are handicapping ourselves, et cetera. And that's causing some of that. But change takes a crisis, and so maybe it's more than just why we're doing it. How can we change it? And sometimes we need to create a crisis. And if you look at other transformations, like you go from steam to electricity. The crisis is like if you stayed with steam, you were out of business. Yep. That is going to happen here in our industry as well. At some point, people who do not transform, or companies who do not transform, will be left behind. They will be not competitive. They will, and they will be out of business. So it's about, can we manage this crisis? I love to talk, so I go around and, visit ghost towns and all this, and I've told this story many times that I learned it from one of the guys I ride with. There's a ghost town in California called Bodie. It's a park, and when electricity came to Bodie in late 1800s, they believed that if you took the wire and made a 90-degree turn in the wire, the electricity would shoot off the end. They didn't know any better, and that's kind of where we are. So the analogy is like the plant manager with a Tesla, right? All these things, but they really don't know. So when cloud came around, I think we passed that. But some of these things that we talk about, it's just you're saying what you're saying, but it just doesn't ring a bell.
Let me say two things. Elon Musk has a great quote, and he says, the worst thing a smart engineer can do is optimize a solution that should have never been created in the first place. Okay? It's one of my favorite quotes from Elon. And to talk about the crisis we talk about, I am very, very hard on Jim Farley at Ford. Incredibly hard on Jim Farley and Mary Barra at GM and Ford, respectively. But I'm going to give Jim Farley some credit here. Over the last 3 months, Ford has waved the white flag and said, you know what? We're no longer fighting theoretical battles. Manufacturing is now strategic to us because Tesla has proven to us what works. And you know what? I'm okay with admitting we got it wrong. Bosch, you're no longer going to own the IP inside of our electronic control modules. We're going to own the software going forward. We're going to figure out a way to do it. We're going to adopt Tesla's charging technology. We're going to go ahead and jump into the Tesla Warp ecosystem. Why? Because it works. And that collaboration is happening. And what's on the other side of that white curtain is evidence of that. I mean, at the end of the day, the only way that we're going to change manufacturing in the United States to smart manufacturing is together. And I believe that wholeheartedly through collaboration. That's the only way it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the digital transformation, so many of them we know the pattern of failure, right? We're engineers, we bite off more than we chew, we premature optimize, we don't accept uncertainty, we want the end state before we fund and start the project, right? What about when we get it right? Collaboration, obviously a huge part of this. It takes an ecosystem. Getting your architecture right, obviously a huge part of this. What about from the actual implementation? How do we make this more practical for the audience here? This is not a theoretical question for them. This isn't like, these are folks who are going to go back, who have responsibilities to their operations, who are going to make decisions about how they move forward and how they navigate this turbulence in front of them. Like, what advice, how do you get this right? What's the first step that you take, and what level of uncertainty should you be comfortable with as you take this step? Gilad, maybe start with you.
Yeah, so the answer to that is that it's easy. In fact, it's the risks that you need to take in the way that you implement these technologies bottoms up iteratively is much lower than the traditional systems.
That's right.
You don't have to put everything up front. You don't have to buy everything up front. You can just go and solve one problem and start very similar to how you solve problems in Lean. And I tell this message 3 or 4 times a day, and it astounds me that we're still like, you don't have to boil the ocean, you don't have to solve everything at once. Just go find a problem and solve it, and show an accomplishment, and show that technology worked for you, and then it just keeps going from there. But even that is hard, and that is something, because all the barriers, the change barriers. No, it's too risky, and all that great.
I think it starts really with 3 things, and they're layered. So number 1, first and foremost, is the why. It's the digital strategy. As an if you're a C-suite, I talk to the C-suite all the time, and I'm sure John does as well. And the very, very first question when I go in front of a board of directors or in front of the chairman is, who are the smartest people in the organization? It's literally the very first question I ask. And if they say anyone other than the frontline worker, I leave. My team will tell you, I literally turn around and walk out of the room, and I let them deal with it, okay? Because they're dead, okay? Number 2, I ask them, why do you want to be digital? What is your digital strategy? Why is it you want data to be your primary commodity? And if they can't answer that question, I leave. Why? Because there's no way the organization's going to succeed unless the C-suite can answer those 2 basic questions. But after that, it's architecture, minimum technical requirements. We create a fabric, a framework, an ecosystem to enable people to solve problems. What is Tulip? What are the other platforms out there that are like Tulip? They are environments for solving problems. They're rapid application development environments where you enable people to solve their own problems. Do you know what we've been using for the last 30 years as that platform? What has that platform been for the last 30 years? Excel, right? You want to know what the problems are in a business? Go ask people to give you every spreadsheet they've got, because you only build spreadsheets to solve problems you have.
Yeah.
The technology like Tulip, it's designed to solve those problems at scale. That's the issue.
So, to build on what's been said so far, there's not enough, call it manufacturing IQ in our space. This idea that infrastructure is the way we create value is absolutely truth, number 1, but it's also completely antithetical to what most manufacturers want to spend their money and their time on, right? And so this, from our perspective, that ought to be commoditized. There's not enough smart people, and at this point, not enough technology providers in this space to actually serve the need. I mean, there's just enormous opportunity everywhere. But unlike Germany, where this is a bit of a shameless plug, but unlike Germany, where there's a well-greased machine that figures out how academia and how industry and how government can bring this ecosystem together to solve big problems like this. How do we open source? How do we crowdsource? How do we collaborate? We don't have that here. We sort of bring our individualistic mindset into our work, and this has been one of the hallmarks of our success as American manufacturers and a largely, at least historically, capitalistic system. We are really good, and we don't want anyone to tell us how to collaborate or how to do something or how to work together. However, the IT folks have figured this out 2 decades ago. Look at virtually every developer on this planet in the enterprise and IT world. They contribute to open source. They're paid to contribute to open source. They're paid to collaborate. They trust, and that's how we got plug and play. That's how we got interoperability at the IT level. We have to get there as an OT community. And we absolutely have to.
And it requires incentive to do that. So, the unified namespace architecture, which I started with in 2005, my whole goal was centered around one thing, which was I want to win the results war, not fight theoretical battles. Because we can get, you talk about purgatory, proof of concept purgatory, get into planning purgatory, right? I mean, hell, we have clients who spent 2.5 years trying to decide on our architecture. So the whole goal was to create the architecture that everyone could start with, and then go incentivize companies like HighByte, go incentivize companies like Kepware, like Tulip, like CESMII, to join that ecosystem so that they are just natively connected together, because that was fundamentally the problem. What was the number one problem? The problem was data silos. Where did data silos come from? They come from monolithic data structures, because the OEM never once considered that there was any consumer outside of their monolith that would care about the data.
But they still don't.
Oh, right, the large OEM.
Well, there really are no alternatives in the marketplace. There are
Right.
very few. There's a few
Right.
beginning to hit the market.
So guys, we're coming up on time here. I know this has gone fast, but look, we've got an audience here. I have my questions, and I appreciate you guys answering them. But I want to turn it over to the audience. Do you guys have questions? We've got 2 mics here. If you do, please step up. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your challenges, your questions, your concerns.
Come on, Bill. I know you have a question, but yes, here's my man.
Hi. My question is mainly focused on the life sciences sphere. I think there's obviously a lot outside of that, but personally I work in that sphere. So I think primarily my main question is really when you understand at your organization that there either isn't a digital strategy like at all, or there's not an emphasis on that. I know, Walker, I've seen some of your videos where essentially find a new location, which is great advice. But I think on a larger scale, when you yourself as an engineer are a bit siloed in your skill set, what are the ways in which you think getting out of that silo is the best path forward?
In terms of leaving the organization?
Not so much leaving the organization, but growing as an individual in this new sphere.
Start with your own problems. Fix your own problems using the right architecture. Right. I mean, that's where my whole career started. I solved my own problems with technology to free up my own time so I could solve someone else's problems using the technology I wanted to use, and it just snowballed. And that's what happens for organizations at scale. Citizen developers, you start out with 1 or 2, and then you've got 6 or 8, and then you got 60, and then you got 600, and then what you have is a chart like Yuri showed us, the number of screens, the number of users, the number of activity. Start with your own problems and then move on to your peers right around you. That's a sphere you can control, and then you're winning the results war that way.
So you use Excel to solve your problems?
100%. I mean, that's very common.
So now with all this new technology, including Tulip, that's out there, you can get free trials and start solving your problems. Not with Excel, with the other tools that are available now. And that is how transformation starts, by the way. Transformation doesn't start from the top. Right. It starts by grassroots like you, ensuring, improving this. And it's prime right now, right? So don't use Excel, start using these new technologies.
I'm going to get to your question in just 1 second here. I want a quick stat. So in the last 12 months, 43,000 applications were developed on Tulip, right? 43,000 applications developed, deployed on Tulip. How many of them were full MES-like production systems? Probably a fairly small percentage of them. How many were an Excel spreadsheet or an email or a grease board, and they said, I just need something quick. I'm going to build it quick. Maybe it stays there. Maybe I solve the problem, I take it down. But you know what? I spent an hour developing it. I solved the problem. I throw it away. Who cares? 43,000, and it didn't take years of system integration. It didn't take six-figure, 5-figure budgets. We're talking about one engineer with the right tool in an hour or 2, getting the data they need, sharing that context across the organization, and solving a real problem, and that is scalable.
Before we go to Henry, real quick, I want to say this. Steve Jobs' famous thing, laser writer printer in '83, they developed the very first laser printer, right? And all the engineers were getting together with the sales engineers on how we're going to sell this. They're talking about all the amazing technology and the print control module and yada, yada, yada. And Jobs literally tells everyone to shut the fuck up, and he stands up, and he goes over to the laser writer and he types onto his Mac, do you want this? And then he prints it. And he takes the sheet of paper off and he holds it up to the customer and he says, do you want this? The point is, and it's a metaphor for how you should be approaching solving problems. What you want to do is build a solution that you can hold up to your team and say, do you want this?
Hello. All right. I'd love to hear the panel's thoughts on, this is sort of a two-parter, 1 on right to repair, and 2, the disclosure of any and all financial incentives, whether they be already received and or potentially in the pipeworks for folks that sit on foundations like the OPC foundations and even folks like yourself on the CESMII Foundation, John, as it pertains to really being a vendor agnostic, technology stack, solution neutral, manner to really fight for that democratization of the OT and IT convergence space. So I realize it's a tough question, but I strongly feel it needs to be
Not a tough question. It is an awesome question.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking it. John, how much did you get paid to be here, and how much do you get paid for a Tulip engagement?
0.
Nothing. $0.
Gilad, okay. Okay. But you know what? It's important, right? And I think it speaks to the incestuous relationships that exist in this industry. And it's like, it's slowing us down from, I'm a moderator.
I'm not going to speak on right to repair. Obviously, my opinion is right to repair should be law, okay? But let's talk about there's nothing wrong with collaborative commercial relationships. There is definitely something wrong with collaborative commercial relationships that are represented as agnosticism and objectivity. Yeah. And what I would say is if you enter into collaborative commercial relationships, for example, I don't want to pick on Rockwell, I could use this example a million times, but I'm going to use Rockwell. Rockwell enters into relationships with distributors. They never tell their customers, if the customer asks a question, they'll answer it, but they never tell their customers that the AR, the account representation, is designed to control messaging to those clients. They never say that distributor has a financial incentive to steer them to only Rockwell products. There's nothing wrong with that relationship. There is something wrong with not having a policy to disclose that to the consumer. There's an issue with that. Why? What is the problem? Because the problem is that Rockwell or any other company doesn't make best in class in every feature set. And if you want to remain competitive in manufacturing, you want best in class across the stack. You want the best possible option for your problem. So I wholeheartely support disclosure. I don't have a problem with the relationship. I have a problem with pretending it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I would respond from a different perspective and just say that in this space, it's been the vendors historically that are educating the marketplace because there hasn't been a center of gravity in any other typical sense. You've got great organizations like yours. You arguably have something to sell, but I mean, I applaud what you're doing, and you make no bones about who you are and what you're selling, and that's perfect. From our perspective, unlike kind of what I called out in Germany before, we're here funded by the federal government. We've got $140 million to try to convene the brightest and the best minds in this space, the integrators, the technology providers, the machine builders, the academia, whoever believes in this notion of openness and fairness and interoperability. From our perspective, we want at the table to drive the idea of interoperability through open interfaces and through open APIs, period. That's how we believe we get to the idea of democratization. That's how we believe we can create interoperability. I mean, the Tulip folks understand this, so I'm sure I'm not offending them when I say that the world will not, any manufacturer will not only ever buy Tulip from here going forward. There's awesome use cases. I love the SPD story today several times around the incredible use of citizen technologists or citizen developers to identify a problem, solve it quickly, and move it on. But I think SPD would be the first to say there are other problems in this space, in this sort of level 3 space, that other vendors are going to be there to solve. Does Tulip then become another data silo or not? That's up to Tulip, and it's up to their customers to determine whether they become part of a broader ecosystem, a set of open interfaces to drive interoperability so that the other system, the next 5 use cases that aren't Tulip, because Tulip's maybe not perfect for everything, which I think you would agree is the case. Maybe you wouldn't agree, but I think that's probably fair.
For the record, we do agree.
Awesome. This is an ecosystem play, right? So the idea is that the next system and the next use case that's not Tulip plays nicely with Tulip, can create more value in Tulip. This idea of polymorphism and the idea that we've got sort of an inner graph and an outer graph so that a Tulip app can actually improve the infrastructure, the information model, so that the next application can do more things more effectively. These are concepts that I know you're deeply steeped in, that we're advocating for, that we're educating as a vendor agnostic organization to try to raise the smart manufacturing IQ for the industry. That's how we raise the tide so that all the...
I wanted to follow up on so I do have something to sell. At IIT.University, we sell education, very expensive education, mastermind and mentorship. We have 800 paid students, and part of what we talk about is we have 800 paid students who support the free education of 70,000. So we offer a free education to 70,000 unique individuals at the expense of 800, including Henry right there. He's one of those people who supports the education of 70,000. And I would like to see more of that in our industry. We originally started out in oil and gas, doing so much of our integration work in oil and gas. Why? Because they're a pain in the ass to deal with, and they pay a premium. And so we could take the premium they paid and pass it on to the mom and pops who could not afford what oil and gas companies did. And there were many projects that we would do for free. We literally would lose money. I spent $250,000 of my own money on a proof of concept for a mom and pop who couldn't afford it, and I took that money from Pioneer Natural Resources after they paid their bill. The fact of the matter is that mission-driven development is the key. People want to be part of a movement. They don't want to be part of just pure, unadulterated capitalism where dollar is the be-all, end-all.
Especially this young generation.
The workforce
exactly. Now. Yep.
So we are coming up on time here. I don't think we're going to have time for any more questions. I apologize. Is it fast? Yeah, one more question. Sorry, Maddie. We're going to run a little over.
Yeah.
So you spoke to the pitfalls of optimizing poor solution as well as the pitfalls related to spending too much time planning and never implementation. How do you balance that planning versus actually implementing and getting something on the ground?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. So the answer is this. As part of your digital strategy, your architecture, and your minimal technical requirements, you're going to implement a deployment strategy. And that deployment strategy is generally going to be Scrum. Okay, so you're going to pick a sprint length of 2 weeks. You're going to build your solutions 2 weeks at a time or a month at a time. So it puts a clock on you that you have to deliver value every 2 weeks. You have to deliver value every 4 weeks. So you're only biting off what you can deliver in a 2 or 4 week window. But you know that when it comes to the sprint review at the end of 2 weeks, or the end of 4 weeks, you have value that you need to present. If you spend 4 weeks arguing over what you're going to start, you're going to deliver nothing, right? And this is where your corporate sponsorship comes in and your Scrum Master. And so it goes to the heart of how you approach solving problems.
Well, and I would say that also places a set of very important constraints on the tools you decide to choose, right? If you're saying, hey, we're going to take on this project, its payoff is in 18 months, guess what? It's if you embrace this.
Well, you just eliminated SAP, obviously.
Well, guys, we are at time here. I'm going to go.
And a lot of MES players, yeah.
Well, so one parting thought, final thought that the audience can take away, go back to their operations and implement tomorrow. What's the one thing you would leave this group with? And John, we'll start with you.
Wow. I would say, from where I stand, don't accept the status quo. Question, boy, this sounds a little squishy, but question everything. Particularly the vendors that are out there selling you stuff, right? We need the manufacturers out there flexing their muscle. We just created a Smart Manufacturing Executive Council, 30 of some of the biggest, most sophisticated, and some of the smallest, most sophisticated manufacturers in the world to collectively flex their muscle to say, this is no longer sufficient. We have to get the manufacturers to sit back and say, that 986 frickin' mouse clicks to get one sensor up into my ecosystem is no longer acceptable, right? So just raise the questions. If you're in an environment where kind of the status quo is not to be questioned, just build that thought process, build that discipline to say, how do I get this word out there? This is no longer sufficient.
It's a two-part answer for me. So number one, if you're an executive, I think you need to take a long, hard look at yourself and ask yourself, am I equipped to lead an organization of the future? And if you're not, get out, okay? Number two, if you're not the executive, I want you to go back to your employer. I want you to find the highest ranking person you can find. And I want you to ask them a very simple question. What is our digital strategy? And if they ask you what you mean, say, what is our digital strategy? It's a very simple question. If they don't have an answer, you know what your problem is. Okay? If there's anything I could implore you to do, and I promise you, for the vast majority of you, if you go back and you ask your organization what the digital strategy is, you're going to hear crickets, or you're going to get a 60-page PowerPoint presentation that says exactly nothing.
But what do I? Sorry,
Yeah.
we're at at time.
Yeah.
but so what do I do? That's me.
You create your own digital strategy. You solve your problems under your own digital strategy. And when someone's impressed, you go, do you want this?
That's exactly my answer. So start now. There are no barriers. If you have a problem, you can solve with digital tools. If you have a mobile phone and you need an app for a mobile phone, you can, without paying anything, create an app that solves the problem that you have. And essentially, it's arm the rebels. Transformation comes from the bottom. And once you show a result and you go to those executives and say, look, I just did this with no money and I solved the problem, they cannot say no. They cannot ignore that. And that's how you do it. And it just goes from there. It's a bottoms-up motion that starts with empowering the operators and solving problems. And there is nothing holding us back now, nothing. And I'm not only talking about Tulip. These are technologies that you can use today past Excel. Don't take no as an answer. And they're going to come at you. Oh, we can't do this. It's too risky. All that great stuff. It is not. Just do it.
Guys, thank you for your time today. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. I think this is all the time we have, unfortunately.
It was an honor, honestly.
Thank you.
Great answer. Great.